Hello, and again, welcome to Bit Depth. I'm Santiago Ramones. Across from me is
Lucas Cantor. Hello.
I'm very glad to have you. I obviously did a little bit of research and stuff, but I also try not to do too much research because I also want to be curious about you. And so I'm just very excited because I want your job. So who are you and what do you do?
Well, I'm like you, Santiago. I'm a composer. I think I'm just a little bit older than you. So you have my job. That's exactly what it looks like. And I live in Los Angeles. I write music for film and television sometimes. I write music for concerts sometimes. I play guitar and guitar-related instruments, by which I mean basically anything with frets on any number of things, also just for fun. Mm-hmm. And I'm also a writer. I'm working on a book. I guess my greatest hit recently was that I finished Schubert's unfinished symphony with artificial intelligence, and that has led me to think a lot about the nature of cognition and the nature of art and how we make art, and that's what my book is going to be about. So that's it. COVID is a great time to work on a book.
Yeah, exactly. All of those things are exactly up my alley. So first of all, how did you first get started in music?
Well, let's see, we can go way back to the very beginning. Sure. I was trying to impress a girl in my middle school, and there was a guitar somewhere, and I thought I'd learn a song on the guitar and try to impress her, and it didn't really impress her, but I really enjoyed playing the guitar. So I started late by most professional musician standards. I started playing when I was 14, and I took lessons. I took it really seriously. I eventually went to music college where I studied jazz guitar, and I, in fact, hold a degree in jazz performance on the guitar, believe it or not. And from there, I moved to New York City, which is what you do when you want to play jazz professionally. And I was working as a waiter, and I just sort of met this guy that worked at NBC in the music department and liked me. We got along, and he hired me to work with him on the Olympics in Salt Lake City. So I did. I worked on the Olympics in 2002, and I've worked on every Olympics with NBC since in their music department. And being involved in sports television at that level gave me a completely different perspective on music, because sports TV uses a lot of music, obviously. And when I was working for NBC, I wasn't just working on the Olympics. I was working on their programming year-round in the music department. And sometimes I would go on productions and be like a production assistant or a runner or something like that. And I got to be in edit rooms with some of these producers, and I realized, the music they're using, I could make that. And I had access to a studio, so I started. A friend of mine and we would wake up crazy early in the morning, 5:30 in the morning, to get to the studio by 6. And we would try to make a rock sports highlight track before everybody got in at 9. And we did that for a few months, and that album still gets used. It's not music that's on my demo. I mean, it's kind of 90s jock rock basically, but that's the sound of, when you're listening to highlights from yesterday's game. That music is generally just a delivery mechanism for awesome drums. What's happening around it doesn't really matter that much. And so I did that, and that gave me a taste for writing music for media. And I am family friends with the Menkins, with Alan Menken. I went to school with his daughter, middle school with his daughter, Anna, who's a great songwriter also, by the way. And Alan, I basically just asked him. My parents were like, "You should ask Alan." And so I asked him what I should do with my life. And he said, "Well, why don't you, 2 things. Call my agent, whose name is Richard Kraft, who is the biggest film music agent in the world. And also, I have a recording session. Why don't you fly out to LA and just see what our session in LA is like?" And so I called Richard Kraft, and Richard is, maybe you'll have him on your podcast sometime, or maybe you'll cross paths with him, or maybe you already have. But Richard is brilliant and incredibly successful, and I goes to bat for his clients harder than probably anyone in the world, but is also mercilessly honest. And at the time that I was talking to him, I felt like I was doing pretty good in the world of music. And he basically, he got me on the phone and he was like, nobody's ever heard of you. You've never done anything that anyone cares about. So like, don't, my thing was, I'm worried about, I don't want to leave New York because I felt like I was established in New York. And Richard said, you're not established. No one's ever heard of you. Just move out here. And then you can maybe have a career, possibly, if you come out here. If you stay in New York, you definitely won't. I don't know if that was true, but that's what he said. And so I moved out here. I went to the session for Tangled with Alan. And if you've ever been to an orchestral session for a major feature film with a 96-piece orchestra in the room, it's intense. I mean, it's amazing. And everybody there, it's kind of like what I would imagine being on a battleship is like. Like everybody has a job and everybody knows their job so well that everything is run extremely efficiently. And I got there at right at the beginning, and at the downbeat they played a cue, it was just 1M1, whatever cue they started with, and it was this crazy orchestral action cue that this orchestra of 96 people were just sight reading. And I mean I almost like stood up and clapped at the end of it. And I thought it was amazing. And the thing that made me realize that I had so far to go was, first of all, I'd never heard music performed at that level. Like I'd never been that close to music performed at that level, period. And after that cue was done, after take one was done, everybody in the room had notes. And, I was like, that was perfect. But then someone was like, no, I heard a stage noise over here. And someone, the orchestrator said, well, the violas really could come out a little bit more here. And so that's how I knew I had a lot to learn. And I basically, before that session was over, I was like looking for apartments on Craigslist.
Nice.
Before I moved to Los Angeles, I had heard that Hans Zimmer, who was a composer I was vaguely aware of, having, as most people are, that I heard that Hans Zimmer had a studio, like complex, where he had all these younger composers working for him. And it was like a factory of musicians. And I mean, that was what I heard. Someone told me that at a party. And I guess there was internet. I could have looked this up, but I didn't. I just took that idea and I thought, all right, that sounds like where I need to work. So I moved to Los Angeles and I didn't have an apartment. My friend who has lived here for a while, is a friend of mine since high school, had a boat and he let me live on his boat. So I was living on a boat. I had like a little laptop studio set up on a boat, and the humidity is nice for the guitar, so it was fine. And I thought, all right, I'll give myself a year to like figure out how to get into this Hans Zimmer studio, which is called Remote Control. And it turns out I had like a friend of a friend who worked over there and was one of Hans's composers, named Michael Levine. He was like a good friend of a good friend, but he and I had never met. And he invited me to go have lunch there and just meet him and, see the studio and all that stuff. So I went over and we got along really great. His current assistant was in the process of quitting. So I started as an intern with him. I basically just begged to be an intern. And at the time that my internship was wrapping up, he was going to be looking for a new assistant and he was starting a new show. So I became, after having worked in sports television, won an Emmy, delivered a lot of music that ended up going on the air. I was an intern, and then I became someone's assistant for like $10 an hour. Maybe it was $12 an hour, whatever minimum wage was, which on the one hand sucked. On the other hand, it was, 100 hours a week. So it actually turned out to be pretty good money. But the point is that it was a complete career reset for me. And that was, I think I was 30, I turned 31 that year. So I was definitely old to be an assistant. But that's what you got to do when you're changing careers. And I worked for Michael for several years. He eventually left Remote Control and moved to a studio in Topanga. He actually took Junkie XL's house when Junkie moved to Remote Control. So they just kind of switched studios. And that is the nicest studio I've ever had. It was on a mountain in Topanga overlooking the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah.
And I started writing music with Michael, and then a friend of mine introduced me to someone at BMG who was working on trailers. And I had never done a trailer, but they sort of talked to me because we had a mutual friend, and gave me like almost the same sort of conversation that Richard Kraft had given me years ago. He basically said, yeah, I heard your stuff. I don't know. I don't know if you're right for trailers. I don't really know what to do with this. I'm just kind of talking to you because we have a mutual friend. If you want to like work on this and send me stuff, I'll give you notes and like help you get better, but that's the best I can do. And, that was nice of him, honestly. So I said, okay, sure. And that was on July 2nd. And I think the next day he called me up and said, hey, so I have this project that it's a spec demo for a movie, for a trailer for a movie. And none of my composers are available. They're all like gone for 4th of July weekend. So if you can do this spec demo, I can pay you a little bit of money. And it's with this singer from New Zealand that we just signed. I think she's good. I don't know, whatever. We'll just do this cover with her. And if you could sort of, like you said, you worked for a guy, maybe you guys could do it together so I could sell my bosses his credibility a little bit. And that's exactly what we did. So Michael and I did it together. And the singer from New Zealand that he was talking about turned out to be Lorde. And so we did this cover of Everybody Wants to Rule the World with Lorde. And it was good. I thought it came out great. She's phenomenal and amazing. And it didn't go for the movie that we originally wrote it for. They just didn't like it. And then Lorde that fall blew up and won every Grammy and was touring the world and, didn't have a free second. And what she had done was the Hunger Games Catching Fire, I think, whatever the last one was, had commissioned one of her songs, and then she performed it on a gig somewhere, and somebody videotaped it and put it on YouTube. And so then that song was no longer a world premiere, and Hunger Games didn't want it on their soundtrack anymore. But they loved Lorde, and they still wanted something from Lorde. And the only thing that Lorde had recorded and finished and in the can was the track that Michael and I had done, the Everybody Wants to Rule the World cover. Luckily, it really fit in to that film, and the vibe of it was right and everything. But the entire thing was just dumb luck. And so after I did that, people started taking my meetings and taking me a little bit more seriously. I moved out of Michael's studio and started working on my own. And I've been, sort of doing random composer gigs ever since.
Awesome. So I guess I always like to do these comparison questions, but it's like, how does doing music for sports television, network type stuff compare to doing music for film and television and all these different formats that definitely ask for different things of you?
Yeah, well, it's the same thing. It's the same job. You're just trying to tell a story, and you're trying to help the people who are creating the visual media tell the story that they're trying to tell. And that's it. That's the job in a nutshell. So whether I wouldn't necessarily choose distorted guitars to tell a love story for a Hallmark film, and I wouldn't choose harp and a small string ensemble to tell the story of highlights of a football game. So you're talking about instrumentation differences and production differences, but ultimately all you're trying to do is give them something that will help tell the story they're trying to tell.
Yeah. How do you think that crossover for you from jazz performance into composer, I guess, how did that transition happen? But then also, how does that affect the way that you compose music?
That's a good question. Jazz musicians are all composers. We just compose really fast. So the process of making up melodies on the fly that's composing. We call it improvising, but what it is composing music with an ensemble together in real time. So for me, composing music for someone else and writing it out is actually, I mean, it seems like you have this luxurious amount of time to figure stuff out because it's not happening in real time in the moment. Yeah. And it also frees you from, jazz. You have to sort of come up with some tricks to navigate around the time constraints. At least I did. I'm by no means a master of John Scofield level, but I'm okay. I can play some standards. But so the transition seemed very natural. There's a lot to composing, and this is what I learned when I moved to Los Angeles. There's a lot to composing that is technical, and it is, especially composing for film and television, is as much of a craft as it is an art. And there's a lot to the craft that you have to learn in order to even just be able to get your music to sound professional and make it like the minimum acceptable sonic standard for the marketplace. And that stuff is no joke. It takes years of training. And then there are a lot of things about music and about film production that you have to learn that are necessary to deliver things that editors are going to be able to use, for example. So that was the main thing I had to learn, was the craft of film music. But how I transitioned from jazz to composition, I didn't really view it as a transition. It was just sort of using the same skills in a different way, if that makes any sense. And jazz is just a way of understanding music. It's not, people have asked me, less experienced interviewers than yourself have asked me if I'm classically trained. And, I've said, well, I've been in front of an orchestra and they've called me maestro. I don't know what else I don't know what else you want to, they played my music and it was fine. But no, I wasn't, I was jazz trained, which is just a different training, but you arrive at the same place. And the thing I had to learn, the thing I think I would have known had I been classically trained that I didn't know coming from jazz, was just some of the language that you have to use in order to communicate quickly with musicians who play classical instruments. And that's important, and you have to learn it, because if you're sitting there trying to explain something to them for 5 minutes that there's just a word for that you don't know, that's a waste of everybody's time.
Yeah.
So that was basically the biggest difference. But as far as understanding how music works, how harmony works, I just understand it from a different perspective. And I think jazz musicians make good film composers.
Yeah.
And that's borne out by a lot of evidence.
Yeah. So I guess what were the tools that you didn't have as a jazz musician going into composition, and what were those things that you sort of realized that, like, oh, I need to learn how to do this because I haven't done this yet?
Okay, so the biggest skill that I did not learn in college, that is entirely my fault, and this information was available to me, but I did not take advantage of it, was I did not learn anything about production. And the only, this has probably since changed, but the only thing that I would fault my program for is not forcing me to do it. I really think they should have just forced me to do it. And if I'm being honest, it's possible that they did, and I just sailed through the class with minimum attention. That's possible. I also I definitely took a piano class in college. I took 4 semesters of piano. I can barely play the piano. So, it's all I did in college was practice guitar. That was, I stopped to breathe and eat occasionally. But the production part of it was what I had to learn when I wanted to work professionally, because it's production for delivering music today. Production is the equivalent of literacy. You have to be able to deliver your music to an audience. And if you can play music, that's great, but that means you can only deliver your music to people that are standing in front of you. So you have to be able to record it, and you have to be able to record it to a minimum professional standard in order to get people to want to listen to it. So that was, I'm sort of an obstinate idiot sometimes, and I was very resistant to paying attention to that stuff and to learning about that stuff and to thinking that it was important. And it took moving to Los Angeles and basically getting a job where I was browbeaten with that kind of thing daily in order for me to get good at it. And now it seems it's kind of second nature to me now to produce something and make it sound nice. And all the things that musicians and producers do to make their music sound good. It's second nature to me to do that. I would never think of sending someone music that wasn't finished, but I used to just say like, well, they'll hear what I'm going for. I'll just play this guitar part and, they'll hear what I'm going for. And I guess probably the best thing that I learned, and maybe one of the most valuable lessons I've learned, is that nobody hears what you're going for. Like when you're giving them music, you have to give them the finished idea or they're not going to get it. And it's not because they're not creative or because they don't like you. It's because, what seems obvious to you is just not obvious to someone else. And that's why you have to finish it. It's just like, J.R.R. Tolkien didn't, go to the pub and say, all right, it's like this book about there's these little guys called hobbits, and then there's these big guys, and they're from the place with a bunch of fire, and there's like a ring, and this bad guy with the ring, and then the little guy with the ring, and he takes the ring to the other place. That's, and you guys will fill in the details, right? Like, the details are the story. I
promise it'll be really cool.
Yeah. Just give me a bunch of money and I promise it'll be amazing. But no, it's my business is exactly the opposite. I have to give the client basically what they're going to buy before they even pay for it in some cases.
Yeah. What's sort of been your biggest challenge as of yet in your career?
My biggest challenge in my career. It's a good question. I'm tempted. So I'm trying to think of like a existential challenge that I had to overcome. Because the challenges, to think about like a project that was challenging, every project is challenging. So that's like saying, have you ever had a job? Every project I've ever had to do has had its own challenges. And, what has been my biggest challenge in my career? And then the other thing is that like challenges that I've overcome don't seem like they were that hard in retrospect. I guess moving to Los Angeles was a big thing to do. It was I'd never lived more than, 30 miles from where I was born, and I had no contacts or prospects out here. And I was already like 30. So if I spent 5 years screwing it up, I'm in the middle of my career, at that point. So that was, I guess that was a challenge. It's hard to, how do I put this? Yeah, it's hard. That's a hard question to answer, man. You're a good interviewer.
Maybe, although I do want to make sure that the questions are answerable. So
yeah. Wait, I have an answer for you. The biggest challenge for me in my career was having to learn how film music is, like having to learn, like I said, the trade of film music. That is an ongoing process. And like I said, like I mentioned, learning how to talk to musicians in a studio setting and learning how to operate all this equipment so flawlessly that you don't need to think about it. Yeah. So that's an ongoing challenge, but it's kind of like the challenge that, music is a challenge. The whole thing is a challenge. It's, I hear comedians say a lot that they've been doing stand up for, however many 20 years and they don't feel like they're good at it, and this is like, Dave Chappelle says that, and that's kind of how I feel about music. Like it's a challenge every day. So there's not really a particular moment that I felt like, oh, this is a thing I need to get over in order to be able to do this. It's just every day there's a different challenge and you just try to take them one at a time.
Yeah. So who were your biggest influences musically whenever you were first starting, and then who are your biggest influences now?
Well, definitely when I was in high school, I'll tell you something that most people don't know about me before you ask, which is I was super into jam bands and the Grateful Dead and Jimi Hendrix and that kind of stuff. And so that kind of music, those were huge influences on me earlier. And then the album that changed my life was probably either Wes Montgomery's Boss Guitar or Relaxin' with the Miles Davis Quintet. Those two records were given to me at the same time, and they basically made me want to study jazz. I just changed the course of my life after listening to those two records. And so I would say those were huge influences. And compositionally, one of the things that is amazing about Spotify is the ability to discover old music and the ability to sort of on command call up music that you had forgotten about. And for me, this is, when I was in college I've already dated myself, but when I was in college, I had a book of CDs. My biggest expense was buying music. And believe it or not, kids, it used to be a thing for sale that you had to pay for.
People used to buy music.
Yeah, I used to spend hundreds of dollars buying CDs, and I would carry them around in a book because that was the only way to like have it readily accessible. And so I spent a lot of money and a lot of time, but now I can just sort of think of a CD that I used to have and find it online very easily and listen to it. And I was listening the other day to I have this King Oliver. No, it was a Jelly Roll Morton. It was like a Jelly Roll Morton greatest hits album or something. And just a record of his, stuff from the 20s and 30s. And I listened to it the other day and I realized I have stolen so much from this record. I listened to, when I first discovered it, I listened to it, probably for a month straight, and it just got in my DNA. And I just listening to it for the first time in years, I realized, wow, a lot of these tricks I use all the time. And, so that kind of stuff was a big influence on me. I mean, when I was in college, I listened to so much jazz and I listened to so many records over and over and over and over and over again. Herbie Hancock, Headhunters is another one that I think is a favorite for a lot of people. I'll give the listeners a bit of a dark horse answer. There's a great album called Unity by Larry Young. Larry Young is a keyboard player, like an organ player, Hammond player. And the album is Larry Young, Elvin Jones on the drums, and Joe Henderson and Lee Morgan. No bass. He's playing the bass with his feet. And it's so sick. It's such a good record. It's like peak Joe Henderson, peak Lee Morgan. They're just on fire. And it's a great album. So that was a big one for me too. And Thelonious Monk. I did my whatever the equivalent of a thesis is for undergrad. I did I guess I played a lot of Monk on my recital. I used to do with my band. I had a jazz quartet that played around a lot, and we used to do a set of all Thelonious Monk tunes, and I just learned a lot of that stuff. And I don't know how much of a influence his music is on me today. I don't know if you would hear that in my music, but I studied him a lot, and I love his stuff.
And then what are you into now?
That's a good question. I just last night, believe it or not, checked out this album called Bloom by Santiago Ramones. It's really cool. It's really interesting. It's like a very cool minimalist record with guitars, which really speaks to me. And I quite like it. I'm not kidding. I checked out your record last night. I really liked it. I added it to, I have a, so to answer your question of what I'm into now, I'll tell you about the greatest thing that I've ever done that I recommend everybody does. And everybody who has musician friends, you should definitely do this. But about a month ago, I just kind of, I live in LA. All of my friends are musicians. All of them have records. And I thought, we don't, it's like our job. And so we hang out together, but we don't actually listen to each other's music that often, unless we're working on it together. And so I thought, you know what? It's COVID. I got, other than my daddy responsibilities, I didn't really have much going on at this particular time. And so I thought, I'm just going to listen to some of my friends' records. And the first one I listened to was, and I keep saying records, but you know what I mean. But the first one I listened to was an album called Beyond Images by a friend of mine named Jordan Siegel. And it's this jazz album, and it's just so amazing. It blew my mind how good it was. It's like the kind of jazz record that every jazz musician in their wildest dreams wants to make. It's got an orchestra on it. He plays beautifully on it. It's got these great arrangements and really cool tunes. And that got me thinking, how many of my other friends have great albums? And then I listened to a friend of mine named Kate Dunton, and her and her husband, Jake Reed, are a drummer and pianist, and they have a trio with a bass player. It's called Trio Kate, and their record is mind-blowingly good. They're amazing. And so I made a playlist on Spotify called Best of Friends, where I spent like a week going through all of my friends' music and picking out the stuff that I thought was, the stuff that I liked. And so it's on there. I highly recommend everybody, like, you don't have to go listen to my playlist, but like do that for yourself, because it will make you grateful for all the like amazing music that is happening around you. And even if you don't have friends who are musicians, just find musicians who are like local in your area, because there's someone who probably is throwing distance from you right now who is making incredible music. And so I added one of your tracks to my Best of Friends playlist, by the way.
Thank you. Which one?
The first one. So the first one was I listened to all of them, but the first one really kind of reminded me of stuff that I did when I was younger, like this like minimalist guitar, repetitive stuff, and it sounded like some of it was recorded direct and just playing with harmonies, and I really dug it. So
thank you.
It's on there. Yeah. So, but it's a great thing to do, to like listen to. In artistic professions, I think people get really stuck into their own silos and also get into this competitive mindset, where they, and it's really easy to just, have the sort of worst part of your competitive nature come through, which forces you to not look at the other good stuff that's happening around you. And, I mentioned, I could mention any of my like colleagues and friends, like we're all in competition with each other, but it's also friendly competition. I mean, like I've lost jobs to friends of mine and then seen what they did with it and been very happy for them. I've never once had the experience of somebody taking a job that I was up for and thinking that I would have done a better job than them. I've never had that experience. I've always had the experience of like, oh, the person who made that decision made the right decision every single time. And these stories in Hollywood are endless of like, they originally had cast, I don't remember who it was, but someone else other than Tom Hanks as Forrest Gump, and,
sure.
Just like these endless stories of like these things that could have happened, but what did happen ended up being perfect. So yeah, that's, so I don't even remember. I don't remember what the question was.
It's just stuff that you're into now, which is like good. You're into your friend's music, which is great.
Yeah.
One last thing on the music front, or I guess on this side of it, but what advice do you have for people who want to do what you're doing?
That's the big question. So I have a lot of advice, and it really depends on where you're at. I think probably the most important advice that I can give generally, and this doesn't apply to you, Santiago, because you obviously already have a studio there and, you've already kind of committed to this lifestyle. But to younger people, especially younger people who feel like they want to be artists, but don't come from artistic families and don't necessarily come from backgrounds where this kind of career is supported or even known about. The thing I want to say to those folks is that you can make a lot of money being a musician, and the top paid studio musician in Los Angeles probably makes about as much as the top paid doctor in Los Angeles. It is a regular, steady job that you can get. And there are, the top guys aren't even really relevant. There are a lot of people who make a lot of money playing music in Los Angeles that you've never heard of, and New York, and, Nashville, and like all the sort of major music cities. And there are a lot of jobs in music that aren't, being Beyonce or being me or being, the first violinist for the New York Phil or the LA Phil. There are a lot of jobs like being a music supervisor, working in music services generally, being a copyist, being a music editor, being a mixer. There are a lot of jobs in music that are professional jobs that you can get, you can earn a living, buy a house, and raise your family quite comfortably. Yeah. And most people who aren't in the industry just don't know these jobs exist. And so the people in your life system, if they're not professional artists, they're very rightly going to look out for you and say, well, you can't make a living doing this because only Beyonce makes a living writing music. But that's not true. Mm-hmm. Beyonce employs probably hundreds of songwriters, all of whom have made a lot of money working with Beyonce. And and she's just one artist. And there are also, like, for every Beyonce, there are 100 Beyoncés you've never heard of who do really, really well. And so yeah, that's my main piece of advice to young people. It's simply that this is a viable career path, and you should look at it that way. And there's as much of a guarantee of success in becoming a musician as there is in doing anything. I mean, if you want to do a high-paying profession, you're going to have to go into debt and study for like 10 years. You know, you can go to law school and then get a clerkship or whatever I don't remember what they call it, but you go to law school and then you become an associate at a law firm. Like, you've probably netted out your law school and college debt by the time you're done being an associate, but that period is about 10 years. And that's the same as being a musician. You know, you're probably not going to make a ton of money being a musician for 10 years. But the thing is, actually, you can start making money as a musician immediately. You know, go out on a busy street corner and play the one song you know over and over again, and people will give you money. So that's one thing. And then for the sort of next level of people who are aspiring professionals and have sort of chosen this path, if you don't live in, you have to go where the work is. That's the bottom line. You know, it's this is getting less and less true, but I don't think in the like career trajectory of anyone who's trying to get into the business now, this is going to dissolve completely. Which is, you just have to be where the market is. And I say this is getting less and less true because obviously there's a lot of remote working going on. I mean, Santiago, you and I have never met and are in different cities, and you are currently in a city that I don't think I've ever even been to, yet here we are. And so that's more possible than ever, but there is, there's a value to just being in the same city as people. And it's a different type of networking. And then the other thing is Los Angeles and New York and Nashville and London have like a lot of professional music infrastructure. You know, we have a lot of studios, we have a lot of talent that can work at the studios, and that's important. So you got to go where the work is. It's like, think of it as like being a coal miner. You have to go where the coal mine is. You can't just decide to be a coal miner wherever you live, because there might not be coal there.
Oh man. The thing is that, like, I have so many more musical things to discuss, but we'll do that on the second podcast, because now we have hard questions to answer, and this is what makes Bit Depth Bit Depth. So to get to them, what is the role of spirituality or religion in your life?
There is. It doesn't have a role in my life. I don't consider myself to be religious or spiritual. I think the role of spirituality or religion in my life is, it is so prevalent in society, and it is such a big part of almost everybody's lives, and especially such a big part of politics, because it makes people so emotional that, politicians use this to rev them up and like get their agendas passed. That maybe is a too cynical way of looking at it, but it's so prevalent that like I study it. It's something that I find fascinating, but I'm not a religious person, and I don't think God is real. I don't think that there is a consciousness to the universe that has particular desires or thoughts about me. I just don't think about that stuff. I do think about it. I just don't think it's true. And that's not to say, I think the classic sort of critique of this position is like, oh, well, you think you know everything. And what I've heard from especially Christian friends is, well, if there's only one step from thinking that there is no God to thinking that you are God. And that is not true. I'm simply comfortable with the fact that there are things in the universe that I do not understand and are beyond my comprehension. And that's kind of it. So, I don't think that when I die, Jesus is going to explain everything to me, because I think if he could explain everything to me, if the universe were simple enough for us to understand, it wouldn't be able to generate life complex enough to understand itself. So yeah, that's pretty much my position. So the role of spirituality and religion in my life is that, like everybody, I have to deal with the fact that it is a big part of everyone else's life, but it is not a big part of my life. It is only a big part of my life in that I run up against it and end up talking about it with a lot of people for whom it is very important. Some people that I care about for whom it's important.
Yeah. And I'm also not religious myself, so you don't have to like stress about offending me or whatever. So you're good.
So I listened to the episode with Evan Knox of Bit Depth, which I loved, and he was fascinating. I actually now follow him on social media. And your questions were great. And his take on, I thought his take on Christianity was brilliant and beautiful. And like, it works for him and it's a central part of his life. And I think that's fantastic. I guess the reason I'm arguing with myself a little bit is I don't begrudge anyone their spirituality. And I don't think, to the extent that it doesn't cause them to do things that are crazy and antisocial, I don't begrudge them their beliefs at all. And one of the great things about your podcast, and the thing that I learned from listening to the Evan Knox episode, was that as he was like explaining his spirituality and his Christianity, I found myself wanting to like interject and argue with him. Because if I was in a conversation with him, that's exactly what I would have done. I would have said like, hey, this point that you made, doesn't hold water. And then I realized that, first of all, it's a podcast and he can't hear me. So I just had to listen to him. And what I learned from that was that it was definitely more interesting and a better conversation and a better experience to just listen. And that everything that he had to say about his faith and the way that it like buoys his life and leads him to do the things that he does was brilliant and beautiful and well articulated and totally consistent with living what I consider to be a good life. And so hearing someone express that in a situation where there's no room for rhetoric because there's no room for arguing really was powerful to me. I learned something by listening to someone with whom I guess I philosophically disagree with. I realized that we don't actually philosophically disagree that much. So
exactly.
So good job.
Yeah. Thank you. So with that, what is your definition of God?
My definition of God is a fictional character that people believe in to explain the universe. I guess there's probably a better definition than that, but mythology is used to explain things that people can't explain, and has been forever. So and it's also used to pass on knowledge. There's I think of my definition of God is, let me try and expand the question, because the way I'm trying to answer it is, what is I'm thinking of God with a capital G, but and that's a pointless thing for me to define because I've already said that it's not something I believe in. So, but to say I do believe there is something higher. So I guess my definition of God would be the knowledge that my understanding has limits. So my definition of God is, yes, that I believe that my understanding has limits that I will not be able to overcome, and that there is information beyond those limits that I just don't have access to. So I don't find that concept to be, so there's no big G God in that concept, but there is a admission and a comfort with the fact that I don't know everything and I can't know everything.
Yeah. I like that a lot. And that's exactly where I'm going. That's like the point of that question. What is free will, and do you believe in it?
Yeah. I think implicit in everything I've said is that I believe we're just, hairless monkeys running around doing whatever we think is a good idea at the time. So, yeah, man. What's funny is, as I listen to other episodes of your podcast, I hear people stumbling on these questions, and I was like, I'm going to be fluid and articulate. And even though I know the questions, I'm doing the exact same thing that everyone else does, which is inspiring and actually kind of cool. So I suppose that to a certain degree, I mean, I think the perception of free will is really all that matters. If you think you're acting out of your own free will, then you are. There's a certain level of biological determinism to decisions that everybody makes. There is a certain level of, I mean, there are some decisions that are made entirely hormonally. You know, if you catch someone in a bad mood and ask them a question, they might give you an answer that's different than if you caught them at a different time. And it's, this falls into the category of, data sets that I just can't comprehend. I mean, they're probably, I guess I don't really believe in Laplace's demon. It's an interesting idea, but which is for listeners who aren't familiar, it's the idea that if you could just know the position and velocity and direction of every particle in the universe, you could predict everything. And that, like, of course, that's more data than you can ever assemble, we think. But if you just knew where everything was and where everything was headed, you could literally predict everything, which would mean that there was no free will because it was all predictable by physics. And that doesn't seem to me to be possible, but I don't know, maybe it is. But again, I think that would be incomprehensible to us. Like, I think it's like the computer in, why can't I think of the name of the book? Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. You know, it's like Douglas Adams' computers, you know, the answer to life, the universe, and everything is 42. So yeah, that's an answer. We don't understand it. So what do I think of free will? Yeah, I don't know. I guess I don't think about free will that much.
Yeah. And that's fine. What do you think happens when we die?
Probably the same thing that happened before we were born.
Yeah,
that's pretty much, I mean, I don't have more of an answer than that. Anybody who tells you that they do is selling you something.
Yeah. How do you determine what good behavior is?
Well, I have a lot of occasion to think about this because I have 2 sons now. So I not only have to model good behavior for them, but I have to explain good behavior to them. And one of the rubrics that I use for that is when you're contemplating an action, think about, if everybody did this all the time, would it be okay? And in the case of, say, throwing trash on the ground, no, that would be horrible. We would live in, a disgusting garbage dump. But if everybody, So I mean, I think that's a good way to think about, like, is an action that I'm taking that is maybe ambiguously, is in any area of ambiguity, like, is this okay? If everybody did it, like if the guy right next to me did it, would that be fine? And if the answer is yes, then you're probably good to do it. And then the other thing is, there is obviously a lot to learn from the great wisdom traditions, and a lot of them boil down to treat others as you would like to be treated. And I think that's a very simple rule that is difficult to live by, but will really never lead you astray. So I try to live by that, and that makes it very simple. I mean, I just, if you think about, as you're interacting with someone, is this how I would want someone to interact with me? If you can have the presence of mind to stop and think about that, your interactions will be very positive. Because most people want to be treated with respect and with dignity, and they want to be listened to, and they want to be thought about and considered, and to know that, you see them in the vast universe. And I think if you treat everybody like as if they're a special piece of humanity, then you're going to be in great shape.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for my philosophy nerd friends, the first thing that you said is Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative. If everyone did a thing, then but yeah, there's a name for that. How do we reduce the division?
What division?
The question usually has a political context. because of the world that, or at least the country that we're living in right now. But it kind of does go farther down, I suppose. But right now it seems to be a political division. But I think after years of asking this question, it seems to be like, why is it so hard for people to care about each other?
Why is it so hard for people to care about each other? Yeah. So this is this is a great question. So my father-in-law lives in Arizona, has lived in the Midwest his entire life, except for the several months that he moved to Simi Valley to be here while we when we had our first child. And he's a hardcore Trump supporter, and goes through bouts of watching Fox News 10 hours a day, and now doesn't. I don't know if you've noticed this, but pretty much every conservative I've ever talked to, or at least argued with, will not admit to watching Fox News. But somebody's watching Fox News. I don't know who, but it's not me. But anyway, and he and I, like, I'm not a Trump supporter, and I'm probably right of most of my Californian compatriots. But in any other state, I would be considered a communist. And so, but one of the things that I've learned from arguing, and my father-in-law is a great, he's a great arguer, and he's great with rhetoric. He's great. He's quick on his feet. And so we have a lot of fun. My wife and his wife do not understand why because we yell at each other, but we both enjoy it. The thing that I've learned, probably the biggest thing that I've learned from him and from talking to him, is that our political enemies, if you will, are complete caricatures, and there is basically no one. Like, if you're sitting there right now getting dressed to go to a Black Lives Matter protest and protest police violence, good on you and God bless you. But you should know that the people on the other side that you're protesting against don't want to murder Black people in the streets. That is not their goal, and that doesn't mean that that's not what's happening, but that's not their goal. There's no one who wakes up in the morning and thinks, I want to be evil. Everybody is trying to do what they think is the best thing for the country. And there's a lot of money to be made in media in riling people up and getting them to be emotional about an issue, because when you're emotional, you scroll and you watch and you click and you interact and you comment. And so if you were to sit down with a Trump supporter, if you're not a Trump supporter, you would very quickly find a lot of common ground with them. That common ground would not include thinking Donald Trump was awesome, but politically, and as far as what a good direction for the country is, you would find a ton of common ground. That makes for terrible television, and so so I think the way that we reduce division is simply to talk to each other. Talk to your enemies. Find a person that you think you could not possibly have any common ground with, and just ask them a question and listen to what they have to say. I don't know how scalable that is, but if more people do it, we will be less divided. And to just have if you look at the media landscape today, it is designed to divide people by categories, by ideological categories. And there are all sorts of there are ideological purity tests on every side, and there's virtue signaling on every side, and when I look at Twitter and I see someone who has a profile that has a bunch of American flags and a cross and make America great again and a picture of Trump, and then I see someone who has a black tile and Black Lives Matter everywhere and pictures of George Floyd, those two profiles are both doing the same thing. They're both virtue signaling. They're just virtue signaling to different people and or to different groups. But what that means to me is that they're both trying to be good in the context that they think is reality. So and the reality of our political life right now is that it's hard to look at the other side and to look at people who disagree with you politically and be sympathetic to them. And it's hard to hear what they're saying, even if they're saying it clearly, because they're mischaracterizing, their pundits are mischaracterizing what you're saying. Your pundits are mischaracterizing what they're saying. But I can almost guarantee that if a Black Lives Matter activist sat down with a Proud Boy and had a beer or a cup of coffee or a soy latte, they would probably both get up from the conversation thinking like, oh yeah, we're more or less, we're like 10 degrees apart on a couple of things, and we are well within the realm of compromise on basically everything. And that's not true of everyone. There are fire-breathing, media savvy caricatures, of these positions, and that's what we see. But most people aren't that. And for most people, politics is not the most important thing in their life. So they're happy to compromise just to move on. But this was a good question because I could talk about this for a long time, but I think I'll stop here.
Yeah. No, that's really good. I think this episode is going to run a little long, and that's okay. Do you believe that humans are evil by nature?
I think in my last answer, I don't think there is really such a thing as evil. So no, I don't believe humans are evil by nature. I think evil and good are concepts that we've invented to describe feelings, and that's all they are. There's, is it evil for a cheetah to eat a gazelle, or is it evil for a cheetah to starve to death? I mean, it depends whether you're the cheetah or the gazelle. So, on the one hand, evil in the world that is unaffected by thought is 100% relative. Evil in the world with thought and feelings and human cognition is can be avoided by doing unto others as you would have them do unto you. So I think it's that simple.
Cool. What do you think humanity is heading towards in the future?
Yeah, I don't know, man. I think there's, it depends on like which sci-fi book I've most recently read, right? Actually, that's not true, because every sci-fi book or movie, no matter how dark and a dystopia it starts in, ends with the redemption of humanity. Except maybe Mad Max. Okay. But I just finished reading the Broken Earth trilogy and K. Jemisin, and it's also spoilers for anyone who hasn't read it. There's going to be spoilers in the next few things I'm going to say, so like skip ahead a minute. But it starts with human beings are like scattered across the earth in this apocalypse. It's just a apocalypse that happened so long ago nobody even remembers what happened, and ultimately it is it's ultimately resolved. Like it was thousands of generations ago that this thing happened, but through seeds that were planted then by people who were doing the right thing then, tens of thousands of years later, the situation is resolved and humanity is able to get back on its feet. And that is the story that we tell ourselves about what it means to be human, that, we're always striving towards greatness and we're always trying to be better, and that we will solve any problem that comes our way. And to some degree, I believe that. To some degree, I don't. And I think really with my take on, hand in hand with my take on spirituality, my only role in this is to do the best that I can, and, to maybe try to help other people do the best that they can. But but I don't know where humanity is headed. I think there are a lot of troubling signs in our midst, and there are a lot of really inspiring signs in our midst also. And we tend to basically do a coin flip whenever we get to a big crossroads, like often it works out, sometimes, and often it doesn't. And it seems to be about 50-50. So I don't know. I hope that my biggest fear for humanity is that we're going to destroy ourselves with nuclear weapons. That's still my biggest fear. That is present. It is, just because it's possible. We do have a tendency as a species to do whatever is possible. So
Yeah.
that is possible, and I hope we decide not to do it. The capability of being able to destroy ourselves is new. Relatively, and I mean in a geological or even just sort of the history of humanity sense, it's extremely new, and it's dangerous. And I think we also are heading in a direction technologically where we are, where we're moving towards the ability to enslave ourselves as well, in a way that's different than chattel slavery, and probably better than chattel slavery, but slavery nonetheless.
Yeah. So again, to get away from the darkness of that, what are you optimistic about for our future?
Well, we have never had better tools for finding stuff out, which seems to be the thing that is the most important to us as a species. History, I think, is really divided into two main narratives. One of them is the narrative of war, and history is basically the history of warfare and the history of leaders of warfare, and which we refer to as the histories of nations. But then the other side of history is philosophy and the history of epistemology and the history of knowledge. And we've never been in a better. And these are two things that human beings are passionate about: fighting for power and fighting for information. And sometimes they're the same thing. But we've never been in a better position to find things out because we've never been more connected. To sort of borrow a Yuval Noah Harari analogy, part of our nature is similar to the nature of bees in that we're extremely collective, right? We're able to behave collectively. But as he put it, the bees can't organize and overthrow the queen and declare a bee republic. So that is where we differ. And so if you think of humanity as like a bunch of beehives throughout the world in history, and for a long time, only the ones that were close to each other were able to interact. And now, and even up until, 50 or 60 years ago, that was true. You could communicate with everyone in the world, as basically in the 20th century, it was possible. But the level of connection that we have now is huge. I mean, it's amazingly, I don't think I need to explain it. Everybody who's listening to this podcast is currently participating in that intense level of connection. And the fact that all of that communication is recorded and can be mined for data is partly what I mean by I think we're heading towards our own enslavement, or possibly heading towards our own enslavement, but it's also an incredible, incredible resource to understand human speech and human emotions and human communication and human thought patterns, and to be able to understand how humans behave over time. We've just never had this, and it's so new that it's hard to know where it's going to lead, but it's definitely going to lead. It already has led to many, many interesting discoveries, and it will certainly lead to more. I wish I could live like 300 years to see, to read the books about this period that are written with some perspective, because it's an amazing time that we're living through.
Yeah, definitely. What makes you content?
That's a good question. You know what's funny is, like, I knew these are the same questions that you ask everyone, or maybe they're not the same questions you ask everyone, but like I knew this question was coming. I should have thought about it, and I did think about it, and I guess I didn't come up with anything. I mean, I feel content. Like what we're doing now is one of the things that makes me feel content. I like connecting with people and talking about ideas. I like reading and learning about ideas. I like creating music with other people. I think interacting with other people makes me content.
Yeah.
Like interacting in a meaningful way with other people makes me content. And yeah. And I guess content is different than happy, right?
Yes.
But yeah, I think like connection for me is contentedness.
Awesome. When will you be satisfied?
I'm satisfied right now.
Beautiful.
Yeah. I one of the things I realized in my 20s was that I'm a pretty optimistic person. And every day there's like something new. Every day there's something new and awesome. And I feel like every day is kind of the best day of my life. So yesterday was a really good day. And today is so far even better, even though it's not even 9 o'clock where I am. So yeah, I think I'm pretty happy, and I think I'm pretty satisfied most of the time. But, you know, on the other hand, I'm an American. I live in a materialistic culture, and, you know, I don't yet have a Tesla, but, you know, having a Tesla is not going to make me satisfied. It's just going to make me drive faster.
And spend less money on gas, I guess. But what advice do you have for people in general?
I don't know if I'm qualified to give people general advice. You know, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. There are any number of platitudes, but I don't have I think advice really should be specific. So here, I'll give people general advice. If you would like to know anything that I know, or you would like my take on anything, I am super easy. My name is Lucas Cantor. You can Google me and find me, and you can get my Instagram or my email immediately. Just ask me a question and I will be happy to answer it. So I think, probably the best advice I could give to like just a general person is if you want to know someone or you want to talk to someone, you live in an age where you can reach out to them and find them, and almost everyone will talk to you.
Yeah. Yeah. Lastly, potentially most importantly, cake or pie?
So I actually have the same answer. I'll give you a really long answer to this question. I'm just kidding. No, the answer is Toll House cookie pie. The one and only answer is Toll House cookie pie. It's exactly what it sounds like. It is a crust with a cookie in it, and you got to serve it with vanilla ice cream, and it has to be warm, and they have to be Toll House chocolate chips. And there's nothing better in the world.
That's amazing.
I want to tell you probably the most important thing about my life, which is that my wife has celiac disease, and which means that she is not allowed to eat gluten, and she gets really sick if she does. And it means that we can't have any gluten in our house. So I love her so much that I've given up Toll House cookie pie for life. So there it is. Yeah. I guess I can have it at a restaurant if she's not around, but I can't have it in my house.
Yeah. That is the sacrifices that we make for love.
Yep.
Lucas, thank you so much for doing this with me. Where can we find you and your things?
So I'm easily findable on my website, lucascantormusic.com. I just stumbled over the name of my own website, but it's just my name, music.com, and Lucas D. Cantor on Instagram. So those are the two best places to reach me. And seriously, if you have any listeners who are musicians or aspiring composers, like I'm always happy to answer questions, and just hit me up.
Yeah, definitely. Which I'm about to do on the second podcast. So,
yay!
But yeah, no. Thank you so much for doing this with me. I'm Santiago Ramones.
I'm Lucas Cantor.
You can find everything that I do on my website, santiagoramones.com. I make music. Bloom is available now, streaming everywhere. Put it on in the background or show it to your friends so you can all enjoy it together. You can also buy it on Bandcamp and get bonus content so you can sit alone in the dark with your headphones on and listen to the album in its entirety while reading and looking at the bonus content. I also make music with Power Cycle, an experimental electronic trio. Our first completely improvised album, Too Many Damn Cables, is streaming everywhere. To support this podcast, leave reviews, comments, tell your friends about it, and buy my music, because by supporting me, you're supporting the podcast. I always end the podcast with my 3 things. They shape my life philosophy. Those 3 things are: love never fails, it's going to be okay, I might be wrong.